So I think James already started. James has been digging, and that's our digging.
Perfect.
Bed.
What do you guys want to know about? What are the methods you're using to garden right now?
Low maintenance. You want a garden with little work.
Amen. Amen to that. One thing that I've been just really converted to is the idea of, like I said, in there using troughs and mounds to plant, and that's basically how it's been done for eons. But it's sort of new to me because I've been using a raised bed with a drip system, and I've actually started to do a lot of the troughs and mounds within my raised beds too, because it just is really great. When you dig well, let's just say this is our plant, and what we're going to do is dig a trough, and it's easier to do it with a hoe, but this is the idea. So you're going outside of the plant's root zone, okay? So root zone would mean different things for different plants. And for example, just say you're planting in your garden like squash or pumpkins or whatever, you plant those in mounds anyway, right? So instead of digging down, I would pile the dirt up like this. And then allow this to be my trench. Okay, so both ways. That makes sense? Okay, but it's good to see it, right? Yes. All right. Okay. So here's your mound, and you're going to want to flatten this out so that it has
James will love this.
a berm on each side. Okay, let's pretend we haven't planted yet.
We haven't, so you're good. We have some dead tomatoes from last year.
Okay, so here it is. And what I would do, and like I said, I do this in my raised beds too. What you're doing is then you're still going to water in the trough. Okay, right along here. And the reason you do this is because a lot of the plants don't like what they call wet feed. And a lot of people, for example, will plant a plant and then they'll make a ring right around the plant so that the water collects right at the base of the plant. And they won't be healthy that way. They won't be happy. They'll get lots of diseases. And once diseases come, then you're more susceptible to bugs, things like that. So the idea is to keep the water into the root zone. So when I water this, the water is going to soak the ground in this entire area. Once it soaks into the trench, it's going to soak and spread through this entire area. Does that make sense?
Go all the way around
Yes.
that, right?
Sorry.
So even when they're just little teeny tiny plants, still the root system.
Okay, that's a good question. That's a great question. This is actually for established plants. So when you first, for example, if you're going to start with purchased seedlings from the store, you would have to use a sprinkler or something to water above ground. Okay, you're going to want to put the water on top that way. And then once they're established, at maybe the first 2 weeks or so, and then after that, it'll start being established, and you can start watering this direction. So does everybody have that clear? It would go all the way around. Okay, and if you're doing like long beds, you do this all the way down a row. And building what happens is, this is sort of like a mulch area, and it keeps, like if you're going to apply fertilizers, granulated fertilizers, it keeps everything right here around the plant, and it shelters it also from, like I said, too much water. Now, if you're planting, once you've got everything established, the best way to water is with like a water-soluble fertilizer. So what you do is you you could use your granular fertilizer this way too. You sprinkle your granules or your water-soluble fertilizer like the Miracle Grow boxes. Just sprinkle it in the trough and then let your water it in, and it waters it right down to the root zone. Makes sense. Any questions?
Is this only for garden areas?
This is
Or
for,
is it for new trees, new, bushes?
absolutely.
Okay.
This is really beneficial for trees. As a matter of fact, of course, depending on the size of your trees are going to want 3 to 6 feet
Yeah.
around it. You can use the same method because they don't like to have wet around their trunks either. So it's a good idea. And then when you're talking about that large of an area, like Brother Everett said, you have to start worrying about drainage and slope and things like that. So it can be a little more work, admittedly. But it really is beneficial. Once you get it in place, it really just takes care of itself. Like we talked about, you can just take your hose from your house, or if you're using irrigation, which is not against the law. I use my irrigation water. It is directly from the river, but that's what I do.
You don't put filters on it, right? Because it helps.
Yeah, you can. And it is a good idea to filter, and probably you have filters already in your sprinkling systems, because I think that's one of the things that they put on just standard, because you'll get a lot of big junk in there, wood chips and stuff.
Aaron, if you have a long, skinny garden, would you recommend doing 2 troughs, like one on either side of your row of plants, or would you just do 1 row and then maybe alternate where you plant either side of your trough?
That's so this would be my 1 row. If I were going to do this, I would do another trough along this side. I should probably make an accurate picture for the video too. This
Everyone steps back. Watch out, turn it on me.
you plant down the center, and what you can do, depending on how you want to do it and the particular plant that it is, some plants need more space, and some you can plant pack in there tightly. But yeah, you could do what's called a hedgerow, which would be like plants right next to each other, and you could do a double row. But you'd have to look at your particular plant and decide how much space that you need. So, or you could do, for example, with tomato plants, I've done them like alternating, one across, and then the other one across, and the other one across that way, things like that. But it does depend on the plant. So you could actually make this bed double wide here, and do it that way, and then you just have the trench all the way around. Does that make sense? Okay. What's your question? Yeah.
If like in my garden, I have a drip system, where would I put my drip line on something like this?
You put it right in the trench.
Okay.
Or if you're doing multiple trenches, you actually could run it this direction.
Okay.
And it is going to get some water in your main area, but not quite as much. So you could do it either way, depending on how you have it set up.
Because I have a slope in my garden, and I have my rows running, against the slope, so that's the water just kind of flows down to the bottom.
Yeah.
So I would just put the line in each of the troughs above where I'm trying to water, because it goes down.
Yeah, and that's exactly the idea of this, of using this, because it works ideally on a slope, because you can basically trap the water in the pockets, and you're getting a uniform coverage. And that's a great question. Any other questions?
When you were talking about the fertilizer, you put it in the trough
Yeah.
and not up above.
Once it's already established. If you're planting seedlings from the store, you're probably going to want to mix it in with in a flower pot, like a gallon or something, and to put a scoop of that in there, put it right around the plant. But that's just for the first 2 weeks or so until it's established, and then you can start watering in the troughs. So,
Fertilizing in the troughs, or
yeah,
just
fertilizing too.
fertilize?
Just if you're using and that's the other thing we'll talk about is before you plant, prepping the soil, you'd ideally have fertilizer just the common fertilizers like a 16-16-8 or a 16-16-16 mixed into this soil, and then you do your trenches and your troughs right here. So you already have the fertilizer in there, and then on the top of that you can top dress. The other benefit, and that brings me to another point, like for example, if you're growing corn, corn needs a shot of fertilizer. It's called banding, and it needs that about, trying to think, when it's like between 8 and 12 inches tall is the time that it needs that extra fertilizer. And this makes it so simple to to band the fertilizer. There are two different ways you can do it. You can spread it right here, like see your corn would be in the center, of course, and you could band on this side or on this side, or both, if you're depending on your application rate. And then the other idea is to, like I said, just the other